Will here from everydayace.com, here to do a book review of David Edwards' Creating Things That Matter. So I'm nearly finished with David Edwards' book, Creating Things That Matter, and I want to do a little recap book review for you, for those of you who are thinking about getting the book and listening to it. I listened to the audiobook version of it. So it's an important question: how do you create things that matter? And the things that matter to David Edwards are things that will last a long time, that will not be around for short-term profitability, that will be able to last sort of through the ages. So I'll go through the ideas in the book, the main key ideas that I think are important to remember, and then I'll go through things that I think were not so great, and then I'll give my overall review. So first, one of the ideas in the book are the things that matter are usually associated with beautiful things, aesthetically beautiful in the sense of philosophical aesthetics, right? So it doesn't have to be attractive, that's separate from being attractive, but beautiful. And he doesn't really define exactly what beauty is, other than to provide some examples. For example, you know, the MacBook Pro or an iPad is beautiful in a way. Other interfaces, other products that last a long time have their own sense of beauty, and making things beautiful is sort of a way of ensuring, of knowing that they will matter in the long term. He doesn't really define, at least what I picked up, what beautiful is, but other philosophers have talked about beauty extensively, and some have pointed out that beauty is truth revealing, and I'm not sure which philosopher brought that up, but that's what I remember from my undergrad philosophy courses, is beauty will reveal some sort of truth to you. So maybe that's what he has in mind for what beauty is and what beautiful things are. I'm not sure exactly. I sort of wish he had gone into more depth in that area, but if you define beauty as something that reveals truth, it sort of begs the question about what is truth, and then you get into the whole set of what's called epistemology and theories of knowledge, which we'll not go into now. Okay, so what we have so far is that things that matter will last a long time because they matter, and also they're beautiful in some sense. So let's get into creating things that matter. So the author has 3 different steps for the creation process. Number 1 is ideation. And this is, to me, is the most interesting step in the book. Ideation is the talking through, creating the idea, coming up with the idea for the thing that matters, right? So typically you or a company might go through the ideation process and think about products that consumers want, talk to consumers, come up with ideas, and he doesn't go against that. Later on, in different stages of the process, he talks about getting feedback from individuals, but one interesting aspect is you don't necessarily need to do that. A lot of artists have their own spirit, their own intuition, and he talks about intuition in a more concrete sense that other people have talked about intuition in the past. So to the author, intuition is that idea that for your entire life, you watching this video, you've passively taken in all this sensory information into your subconscious, into your mind, into your body, and so you have a sense, even though you might not intentionally be thinking of it, of things that ideas that are latent inside of you, that are sitting deep inside of you, that you can bring out, and so that intuition can fire up and trigger ideas that aren't driven by the market, driven by what consumers might be looking for right now. Okay, so you go through this ideation process, and the ideation process can involve a group of people. He has examples in the book later on of groups of people coming together. Brainstorming is a good idea. You know, just thinking big ideas. This is another area where he provides some anecdotes of his teaching, where some of his students who had been, focused on study to get into college, have a lot of the ideas sort of beaten out of them, in a way, to be crude about it. They are just focused on, being very cautious, having small ideas that they can execute well, and then move on to the next project. he's talking about big ideas in terms of, things that manipulating genes of individuals, inhaling chocolate instead of eating it, was another example. And so he has these wacky sort of seed ideas that he puts out in his classes, or he used to at least, and then have students like tackle those. Although in later years, more recent years, he's saying the students that are coming up already sort of have some of these bigger ideas, which is kind of a hopeful sign that maybe the next generation is starting to think bigger than previous generations. Okay, and so you come up with this idea, and you shouldn't downplay the ideation process. It's a really tough process to go through. Individuals may spend years studying in a certain, for example, French cuisine is another area that he picks out, only to eventually connect that. Maybe they want to take their French cuisine knowledge, all of their skills that they learned while studying French cuisine, and apply it to Chilean cuisine or Spanish cuisine. I forget what the example is in the book. Okay, so step 2 in the process is the creation phase. It's the actual doing of the thing. So steps 2 and 3, and 3 is the exhibition. So ideation can be as long as you need it to be, as short, but it can be very short, right? You can just have an idea in a flash. And then steps 2 and 3, creation, actually making the thing, and exhibition, exhibiting the thing, showing it off, bringing it to the public, are steps that will take creators longer amounts of times, and maybe where a lot of ideas, things that could matter, go to die. Right, so step 2 on creation is really a tough step, because that depends upon the idea, right? So inhaling chocolate instead of eating it, well, that needs a lot of seed money. You need a lot of research to be able to do that. Not everybody can just pick that up. And so he sort of glances over, the creation phase, but suffice it to say, says that's a very difficult phase. It's where a lot of creators fall down, but that gets you to the exhibition phase, step 3, in the 3-step process of creating things that matter, where you bring your idea to the public, you get feedback. And he sort of discusses that if you can shorten this phase, these steps, the time between each step, that's better. You get more hits. And this idea has been explored, in the saying, like, fail fast, right? So you have examples all throughout the book. You have famous chefs, dancers, artists. This individual in the book was involved with some medicine development that went really well for him. And it's interesting if you want to hear about, artists who are on the front line of creating things, the creation phase, and maybe you want to follow more of these people. So the book is not really about him. The first part of the book is about his story, but more so it's about the stories of these individual creators, which is really interesting if you want to follow up. If you're interested in more of the arts, I think that's where he spends some of his time focusing, are creating things that matter, in the arts, in food, in dance, in plays. Those are places where he spends a lot of time talking. I mean, those are his examples that he brings up thus far in the book. Okay, so things that I didn't like that I think he could do better. There's a lot of privilege in the book. The author talks about, having his idea, selling his company, it's sort of implied that he made millions of dollars off of his first company, and then he could create a laboratory in France. He called it La Laboratoire, and then he becomes a Harvard professor eventually. It doesn't seem like the most hardship the author has in this book is when he didn't get a professorship at a prestigious California university that he wanted, right? So he didn't become a professor as soon as he wanted to become a professor. And I mean, he talks about working hard, but the privilege is sometimes just all consuming, about talking about his Harvard students and making all this money. And it seems just like, where is the creating things that matter for the little person, the average person? I'm not sure I got that from this book. So would I recommend it? I'm not sure. I mean, I think if you're an artistic person and you want to hear some of these stories, it's very good. If you want to think more about the creation, ideation, creation, exhibition phases, it's good. And maybe if you want to dive more into beauty, if you know this author, I think he's been on the TED Talk circuit, you might be interested in hearing more about his story. But I'm not sure that I felt that this book was for me or for a lot of individuals I know, because we don't have that kind of seed money to make this big project. We can't spend all this capital in making these things. Also, I wish he would define his terms better. Like, what is beauty? I know it's hard to get into, and philosophers have spent thousands of years talking about what makes something beautiful. But to say that the things that matter will be beautiful, I think sort of pushes the question into, well, what is beautiful then? If you want a book that's more about in the trenches, how to get something done when you have your idea and you're getting it started, I recommend the E-Myth Revisited, which will give you a lot of practical advice and is told in a little bit of a less privileged way than this book is. Hope you find that useful. Have a great day. Visit www.everydayace.com. It'd really help me if you'd like and subscribe this video so others can find it, and enjoy.